Hi there. Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone podcast. My name is Isra Ishaq from Fushasi Fitness and Nutrition. On this podcast, I'll be interviewing experts about the various topics taught in fitness education to better understand the research, challenge some beliefs and biases, and provide helpful information to all the other health and fitness professionals out there who may have questions just like mine. Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Now, please remember that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. See you soon. Right, so welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Comfort Zone podcast, where we have conversations with industry experts on all things fitness and nutrition. The aim is really to call out misinformation and share with you evidence-based information, evidence-based approaches towards health and fitness, so that you can feel confident in making decisions around your health and fitness from an informed place. Now, today is a momentous moment, as we've just been saying, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with the GOAT of nutrition, as some people know him. Go and Google what GOAT means, right? but Alan, thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you here finally.
It is my pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to actually be here after I messed up the time zones last time. So thank you for your patience with me on that.
Honestly, it's happened to all of us at some point or the other, right? That is the goal of working globally with other people from the other end of the world, which is pretty cool in itself, right?
That is pretty cool. Yes. So yes, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Fabulous. All right. So for those who don't know who you are and what you do, why don't you give us an intro?
Sure. I currently am a researcher and an educator, kind of that combination. And the area that my colleagues and I mainly work in is non-clinical nutrition and exercise, sort of that integration, sports nutrition, nutrition for improving body composition. And so nutrition for improving athletic performance, typically in the strength and hypertrophy realm, and also fat loss. So that's my area of research interest. And, as we get older, the health question creeps in there, and, that's kind of inevitable. But the way that I got into the field was 30 years ago, actually. And as far as the significance of my role in the field is, I'm one of the first people who brought the evidence-based model to the fitness space. So evidence-based meaning we take a research basis, or we operate on referring to what is in the peer-reviewed literature when we make our claims, and we seek out what's true in the media or in the field, and even just personally, and we kind of cross-check that with what we observe in the field, because the research literature, as good as it is, it's still incomplete, and there's still a lot of gray areas of knowledge. So in a nutshell, who I am, I'm one of the forefathers of the evidence-based movement in the fitness industry.
Happy to have you here again. All right, let's talk about this beautiful creation of yours. All right? And it's literally one of the most impactful nutrition books, and it's beyond nutrition. I know it's called flexible dieting, but the title doesn't really sort of share what this book is really about, right? And I'm going to give you an idea of why I love it later on. But what I was curious about is why this book, why now, and what are you hoping to achieve by writing this book?
Okay, so I wish I had some sort of heroic story and some kind of noble answer to that question. But okay, so here's the truth about the book.
Yeah.
My friend Brett Contreras gave me a call and said, okay, Alan, I have friends at Victory Belt Publishing, and they want you to write the book on flexible dieting. And I think you should do it. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. He basically said, because, Alan, if you don't write the flexible dieting book, one of your students, in quotes, one of your students out there is going to write it. And that's not cool. That's not right. Yeah, everybody in the current fitness and nutrition space, all they do is repeat stuff that you have been saying and that you taught them, basically.
Yeah.
And so you have to write it. You have to get the credit for that stuff. And I'm like, dude, I ain't got time for that.
Yeah.
So I was happy to get the opportunity, and I decided, okay, I am going to take this opportunity to, okay, we can call the book Flexible Dieting, and that's fine. But I just want to, since I'm going to write a book, I want to do an update of a book that I wrote in 2007, which is called Girth Control. And it's basically everything that I feel that coaches need to know about nutrition, just like the evidence-based nutrition book basically is what I wanted to write. And there's different avenues you can go in with nutrition. You can go clinical, different aspects of clinical nutrition. But I was most interested in working with the general population, recreational athletes, and competitive athletes, and sort of that range, the soccer moms and dads, all the way to the high level elite competitors.
Yeah.
And that's just my area of interest. So that's how I wrote the book, and that's why I wrote the book, is because Brett called me and told me I really needed to do it. Otherwise, one of my students or followers were going to write it and just repeat what I've been saying in their own way, and then not in my way.
Yeah, and it's received amazing feedback, right? Because everywhere you see online, and it's not just from the general pop, it's from people like us who've been in this industry for a while. I mean, when I started personal training and guiding people around their nutrition 7-8 years ago, my clients had amazing results as long as I was in front of them, counting reps. You know how that goes, right? They were in front of me, and I was coaching them, and I was training them, and they had incredible results. But the moment they stopped working with me, Alan, they would revert back in their old ways. They would stop training. They would start making excuses for their eating and all of these things. And that's when I got really curious about this whole concept of behavior change. Right? Why can some people stick with the journey, even, stick with the journey and continue to get results, and why other people kind of give up? And what we see in the space right now, there's enough information. I feel like there's enough information around the what to eat, what exercises to do, and all of these things. But there isn't enough information around the how. That soccer mom is thinking, right, I know I should eat vegetables. I know I should eat protein. I know I should focus on my sleep. But how do I do it when I'm raising four little kids and running a home and doing all of these things, right? So it's merging the what and the how is one of the reasons I really appreciate on here, because you talk about behavior change, you talk about individualization, and all of those things are super, super important. And how the book is written is, for someone who's not in the field, it's really easy for them to understand, right, and implement the stuff on the book. And for professionals like myself who love a bit of geekiness, there's enough of that in here as well. You know what I mean?
I've been told there's too much of that. I've been told it's too research heavy. Like I just talk about research the
I
whole
love it,
time.
but that's the point. I mean, people like us are supposed to kind of read that and then convey that information to our clients in a way that they can comprehend, in a way that they can implement, right? Which is pretty cool. So my question is, where do you think behavior change falls on the hierarchy of importance for long-term health, long-term weight maintenance? How important do you reckon it is to work on changing overall behaviors, not just nutrition and fitness, by the way, everything, you know, stress management, sleep, being happy, you know, stuff like that. How important is that?
I think that is of utmost importance. Utmost importance. In fact, you know, you bring up sleep. Aside from, you know, hydration, perhaps, sleep is, I mean, right there with the foundation of, if that's not in place, then nothing is really going to happen in terms of successfully changing the body or even maintaining good health. You know, if you're running a lack of sleep chronically, you're going to have dysregulated appetite. You're going to have low non-exercise activity. You're going to have low exercise output, low performance capacity. Those things are all going to go, you're going to have low mental capacity, low cognitive capacity. And so all of those things combine to setting yourself up to fail. And so even with something as seemingly elementary as sleep, or simple as sleep, or even trivial, you know, sleep, we'll get to that. You know, we can just run on 4 or 5 hours a night like some people do. It's extremely important to get that in. And behavior change, habit change, it's crucial. It is absolutely crucial. And you can have the most perfect program. You can hand somebody the most perfect menu, you know, and training program, and say, okay, this is what you do. But if the person doesn't have a background on why it's set up the way it is, if they don't have just a very basic education of, okay, what's the objective here? To eat fewer calories by the end of the week. Okay, that's the objective. So therefore, if you run into certain compromising situations, then you know how to essentially compensate for it and steer right back onto the road and keep going. And so you have to know what the objective is, what you're doing. So that involves a bit of education. And then you have to have the right tools in the tool belt in terms of responding to difficult circumstances in the environment. And so those things take practice. And that's kind of the essence of building these habits that enable you to succeed. And it's difficult to learn, and it's difficult to teach. And that's why we have a lot of conversations about it, like this one.
Yeah, and absolutely. And those conversations kind of need to continue, right? Because what I find is a lot of people focus on changing their nutrition and their exercise and all of these things. And then life happens, as it usually does, right?
Yeah.
A kid is going to get sick, something's going to happen at work. And then if their coping mechanism is emotional eating, then they're going back to those high calorie, high energy dense foods, right? So super important.
That's right.
We're working on the what to eat through that understanding of nutrition. We also need to kind of work on, hey, the how. How can we make the journey? How can we design it in a way that you can actually sustain even when life is happening, right?
Yeah, and in addition to that, Yusra, we also have to have realistic expectations of progress, as well as realistic end goals. So, you know, with with the UFC having just aired John Jones's return and all of that good stuff. You look at the athletes, and these are people that the general public aspires to look like. They set their goals around these elite professional athletes without keeping in mind that at that level, all these guys do is eat, sleep, and train. That's all they do. And so when you set goals to look like a certain type of individual, you have to keep in mind, well, what's their lifestyle, what's their environment like, and what are the challenges in their schedule. And with populations like middle-aged parents, they have multiple things they're juggling, and they have very limited opportunities to actually train, and they have many more distractions dietarily and everything else wise, so socially, and it's a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. It's a colossal challenge to change the body as a middle-aged parent, particularly. So.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this. Say you have a mom or a dad who has a busy life and a busy schedule and all of these things, and they're like, Alan, I am 70 pounds overweight. I need your help. I want to lose weight. Where do you start with them?
Okay. Okay, so the one thing that you cannot control or have much say in is the person's determination level, their motivation level, their fundamental trigger of what made them turn the corner and decide, I'm going to do this. So the times that it is successful, a common trigger for successful substantial weight change is when somebody feels so almost like a catastrophic level of threat to their health. And so if a doctor tells somebody, hey, you're not going to see your daughter graduate middle school or high school unless you get it together, then some people will go, oh, okay, I better make some changes. Some people will get a divorce, some sort of major life change that really triggers some massive shifts in the way that people feel about their place in their life. So it's those kind of things that you can't control, you know. On the other end of the spectrum, somebody will watch a Marvel movie and admire the the physique of the protagonist, and then they say, hey, I want to lose 70 pounds, let's do this. That, you know, you can't control whether it's that reason or some sort of other profound reason that might have more of a foothold in their adherence to what's going on. So you have to realize as a practitioner, you have limited control over just how bad the person wants it. When I started doing coaching, nutritional coaching and personal training, and way back, I had it in my mind that I can help everybody. Like, and so the very first time that I could not help someone, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how good the programming was, no matter how frequent the check-ins and the follow-ups, no matter how close the monitoring, I felt like I failed. But it's, you know, later on you realize, you know what, if you can help most people, and there's a few that you can't help, you're still doing a good job. And so, okay, so that's the beginning. That is that massive trigger there, is that massive kind of seismic shift in the person's perception and intentions and the way that they view themselves at their place in life. They want to be at a different place in life. Okay, so that needs to be there. And then, but that's outside of your control. But what is in your control is conveying to somebody a realistic rate of loss. So let's take the number that you presented, 70 pounds. That's a substantial amount of weight. And so the benchmark of a pound loss per week, as cliche as it is, and as boring as it is, and as maybe uninspiring as it is, it's actually quite good. I mean, it's right there. It's right in the ballpark of what people can achieve without putting everything in their life on hold. So yeah, you know what? If this person sets a 70-week goal, and if they want to be ambitious, okay, let's set a 52-week goal. Let's set aside a year of your life to lose the 70 pounds. And knowing that, hey, it might take 70 weeks. I mean, you know, this might take a year and a half, but we'll shoot for a year. And as long as they have that realistic expectation from the outset, they won't run into the problems of thinking they're going to lose 2 or 3 pounds a week for 6 months. And then, you know, then we're going to, all they have to do is just, you know, like, or rather, if they're not losing 2 to 3 pounds a week, what's going to happen is they're going to feel like the program is failing. They'll think, oh gosh, I'm only losing a pound a week. There's got to be a quicker way to do this. What other diet is out there? What can I look at? What other program is out there? Maybe this doctor has a particular program I can do to get rid of these 70 pounds in like 3 months, you know? So step number 1, set realistic expectations. And I sometimes say 1 to 2 pounds a week, but I would rather say a pound a week, because if something averages out to work at a pound a week, that's really, really quite fast, and it's good enough for sure. So set the realistic expectations. Okay, so once that is done and the person genuinely believes and genuinely is on board with the idea of hitting their 70-pound loss in 1 to 1.5 years, then you've honestly won a large part of the battle, because then you can just teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What I find from some of the women I work with, right, it's almost like, I know I want to lose weight, X amount of weight, but for the moment, I'm going to forget about that number, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to focus on the process every single day. What can I do today? And what that does is it almost changes how they feel about the journey, because even if the loss didn't happen that week, it's like, I'm good. I ate my vegetables this week. I ate my protein. I exercised, and that's all good, right? So it almost like it takes the pressure off the, you know, hitting the scale, hitting that 1 pound loss every week, to just enjoying the process and, you know, enjoying what else they're achieving that is not necessarily a tangible number, you know?
I agree. I totally agree with that. And, you know, there's some good research backing an approach that doesn't focus on the weight at all. There's a 2-year study by Clark where the subjects lost 30% of their body weight by the end of the 2-year period, which is a tremendous amount of weight. And they, instead of focusing on body weight change, they focused on improvements in exercise performance. They were put on a diet, on a specific diet. The diet was high-ish protein, 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, and they had a limit of 100 grams of carbs, and that was the extent of the diet. And it happened to, you know, it worked well for them to not think about scale weight.
Yeah.
I tend to, I want to make sure that people have the time frame right.
Yeah.
At the beginning, like, hey, this is going to take a good year of grinding this through. And focusing on the weight every day or every week is not typically necessary. And I like the way that you mentioned that, hey, just getting involved with the process, acknowledging those small victories daily, that you are building those habits. I mean, just that is good enough, because, frankly, what really matters is 10, 20 years down the road, not necessarily even like next year. Okay, next year's a start. But the issue is anybody can actually lose the weight. It's just part that involves the building of habits and the building of skills, and the changing of mindset. And so that's the difficult part, is keeping it off.
Yeah, and then obviously that's what's going to help people maintain that loss in the long run, right? Okay, so let's talk about a battle that a lot of us in the evidence space are kind of battling right now, and this is the sea of misinformation out there, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like anyone can say anything about a mechanistic process involving human physiology, and people just buy into it. There's a loss of domain expertise almost. Do you know what I mean? Why do you think this is happening? Why do you think there's so much misinformation out there?
I think it comes down to a handful of things. So first of all, the complexity of the body and the genuine complexity of nutrition, that leaves a lot of room for different interpretations of what's true and what's false. And the world of science and research is complex, and so, and the body is complex. And so therefore there's a lot of different experiences that will be conflicting in the space, and different observations. And people bring those observations with them, and they emotionally attach to what tribe that they like, what tribe they identify with. And then, there's always that social aspect of, okay, this is against my tribe, so I got to defend my tribe and represent properly here, and go to battle with this other tribe, And so it's an odd thing about human nature, socially, psychologically, that we have, and that antagonizes the process of science literacy and scientific thinking. So the body is complex, nutrition is complex. People are tribal and social animals, and everybody eats. So therefore, people feel they have some sort of dominion over what to tell people in terms of what nutrition is all about. Because if you're in good shape and you're in good health, you will have a tendency to teach and preach what you're doing, the details of what you're doing, and how everybody else should be doing if they want to achieve the level of fitness that and the level of health that I've got, etc. And so it's really different with the field of nutrition, because it's not like in law, for example, where everybody lawyers,
Yeah.
It's not like the field of engineering, where
everybody engineers.
It's everybody engineers. But the thing is, with nutrition, everybody eats. And that's where the issues start creeping in. It's almost as if a couple had a great marriage, and they said, you know what, we're experts in marriage, so therefore we're gonna be marriage counselors because we have a great marriage. Just because you happen to get everything right for yourself doesn't mean that that's an objective truth universally, Sure, there may be some insights that this happily married couple might have that people can use, but it's the universal directives that are pushed out that really can confuse people, just like people who have succeeded on, for example, a real common example, keto. Like somebody who's lost 50 pounds on keto will have a tendency to say, I tried everything, but finally I decided to just cut the carbs and go keto. And that was the only worked amazingly. And I've been doing it for 5 years and I've kept the weight off. Therefore, everybody should go keto.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the human tendency. And so yeah, the complexity of the body, everybody eats. And then finally, scientific literacy, or science literacy. And let me know if I cut out, because I got a little indication here that my connection was a little shaky.
It's a bit shaky, but we're good. We're good.
Okay. Yeah. Just let me know when you want me to repeat anything.
Yeah, it's fine.
So yeah, the science literacy is scarce amongst the general public. So that whole phrase, you just got to do your research, do your own research, or yeah, I did my research. That's a minefield, because if you ask the average person on the street about the concept of scientific evidence, so if you ask somebody what constitutes strong scientific evidence and what would you call weak scientific evidence, or just weak evidence, period. What is strong evidence and weak evidence? How would you describe that? You would be looking at a deer in the headlights with the average person. And that is honestly what you would get if you ask somebody who feels like they did their research on a particular question. What they did was they did their own Googling. And of course, Google designs its algorithm to the individual and what they tend to Google. And so their search results are just going to be based on what's most relevant to, the shopping or the browsing that person normally does. And so it is a minefield, and the general public does lack science literacy. Most people, they don't know the difference between strong evidence and weak evidence, let alone the difference between a well done study versus a poorly done / poorly designed study for answering the given question. And so that, the rabbit hole keeps going in that direction. But the bottom line is most people are scientifically illiterate, and that's why there's so much confusion and so many conflicts going on in the world of nutrition. It's that complexity, it's the fact that everybody eats, and the fact that scientific literacy is very scarce amongst the general public, and even the professionals in the space. They struggle with basic scientific literacy because it's not taught everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the perceived credibility and authority of the person talking, right? Because if someone who's a doctor, even if not in the nutrition space, but he's a doctor, he told me to do this, so it must be correct because they're a doctor. And that just fuels the fire, because it's, it just makes things a lot harder than someone like me who's doing her best to share evidence-based information. Now I have to fight against a doctor almost. And they're like, but he's a doctor and you're not. Do you know what I mean? So that perceived credibility is such an issue where people don't understand the concept of scope of practice, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And the whole point of having a certain level of scientific literacy
Mm,
is so you can discern between the high quality information
mm,
and the crappy information, regardless of who is dishing it out.
yeah.
And unfortunately, the best-selling diet books, the majority of them are written by physicians, by doctors. And my hypothesis on why that's true is because doctors are just very natively intelligent people. They're innately intelligent people. And along with that high native intelligence comes a certain extraordinary degree of and confidence
Mm,
and presumption that you're correct.
yeah.
And that those naturally would go hand in hand. That's a thing with brilliant people. They think they're brilliant in every department.
Yeah.
And so if they dabble in nutrition, oh heck,
Yeah.
I'm an authority in nutrition because I'm brilliant, you know. So that's really an issue. And I'm glad that you brought up that issue, because people just trust doctors on face value
Yeah.
when they shouldn't.
They do. They do. So if someone was getting their nutrition information from social media, let's say, what kind of red flags should they keep an eye on? You know?
Yes. Okay. Anytime somebody conveys a message of absolute nature,
Mm,
so saying you should never have these foods, or a dichotomously put claim like these foods are bad, like avoid this, and these foods are really good. These are the superfoods that are going to get you to fantastic health. You've got to seek out this food. And so anytime things are put in absolute terms like that. And another red flag is when somebody doesn't present the strengths and limitations of a given claim or a given study or a given concept. You know, there's always going to be limitations and weaknesses to it, and that should be presented as well. So you can make your judgment about the pros and cons of the protocol and how it might apply to you or how it might not. And then another big red flag is if there's no supporting evidence for the claim that's made, if there's no evidence provided. And certainly when you ask for evidence, so you hear this claim, you feel like it's a bold claim, and then you say, okay, that's interesting. Now, can you link me to the study or the evidence that this is true? And so if the person is unwilling to do that, then that's your cue that, well, this is a problem. And so a lot of times people will make claims without wanting to present the evidence, and that should tell you that this is a little bit fishy.
or they're going to tell you to go do your own research.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, if you want to engage with somebody in discussion about their miracle diet or their miracle protocol or their special 2 minutes a week exercise program that's going to get you to your goals, if you want to engage dialogue with them and they're on social media and it's almost their job to engage and they don't or they won't, that's another red flag.
Yeah. I think given how accessible information is almost like people have to have this awareness and build the capacity and ability to ask questions and think critically, right? You
Yes.
can't just go on social media and believe everything that you read and expect it to be true. It's going to leave you anxious and feeling like, oh my God, being healthy is so hard, because that's what a lot of people think. if I want to be healthy, I have to cut out all these things. So no, forget that. I'm just going to stay here and not do anything about it, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
And yeah, those kind of absolutes, those kind of a lack of margin of, see, a lot of times with any given thing, like we can take added sugars, for example. There's a lack of nuance in the conversation about added sugars. People just think sugar is bad or sugar is good.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it's a matter of what kind of sugar, what source, and how much of the diet does it take up. So all of those things have to be discussed in order to provide context. And so when we discuss any sort of concept, we have to set up the context, just like with, well, we'll take the sugar thing, for example. I had a knockdown, drag out debate with, and I don't remember whether it was on sugar or not, but there's a dude named Dr. Nicol Antonio, and he's said some stuff that's controversial and some stuff that really gets the science-based community really rustled up and just upset.
That's been happening a lot lately, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And I did a post one time, and he came in there, and he engaged with me for thousands of words. I mean, like we just went back and forth. But the thing is, like, I appreciate when people come in there, if they have if they oppose what's being said and they want to present a counter argument and they want a dialogue. And I'm all for that.
I have to say that I really admire that you can do that. The patience that you have, Alan, is insane. I'm just reading it, and I'm like, how is he so calm?
Well, that's the that's the thing. It's like, unfortunately, during these things, I see folks engage, and then they do get emotional and they say some insulting things, and then they end up getting blocked by, and it's like, I as much as I disagree with Dr. Nicol Antonio on certain issues, I appreciate that he came in there and he tried to present his argument in detail, presenting evidence and all of that. And I don't always have time to get into long knockdown, drag out social media debates, but I think it's important to do that once in a while. Yeah. And the only way that it can be done is if both sides approach the debate in good faith. and I think it's possible for good things to come out of that, like, once in a while. But yeah, okay, context and the sugar thing. It's like, it's one thing for somebody to claim that sugar is bad, we need to avoid it, or bread is bad and we need to avoid it. All right, first of all, there's no evidence for that. Secondly, as far as the evidence is concerned, it appears that we can have a low amount of added sugar in the diet and still have a high quality diet. As far as let's say bread is concerned, there's research examining the presence or absence of bread in a hypocaloric setup and whether or not people could adhere, and bread actually helped with adherence and resulted in better diet outcomes. And so there's context to everything. When people make these absolute claims, then you have to ask, okay, what's the context and what dose are we talking about here? And even this can even extend to the protein debate, the protein argument. It's like, there's this question that's put forth so oversimplistically, like, is high protein bad or is high protein good? Okay, well, what dose are we talking about? What population are we talking about? And what goal are we talking about? And so whenever we talk about goals, there's levels to different goals. I mean, are we looking at Olympic gold versus silver, or are we looking at, showing up at the beach and feeling okay without a shirt, or you know what I mean? It's like there's different goals and different levels. And so with anything, with any claim, like the protein claim, again, for example, we have to ask, what's the goal? What's the population that we're talking about? And what's at stake here?
Yeah. So they miss out the context, the dosage, and the individual in front of them potentially, right? Yeah.
That's right. When absolute claims are spit out, the nuance is lost, context is lost. And that's the only way you can have a productive conversation. That's the only way you can really progress, if you have a pulse on what is the context here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump on a topic that I know is one of your favorites, and that is how to age strong, right?
Okay, yes.
Can I just say, your father and mother-in-law are absolutely incredible. And
thank you.
I'm following their journey on social media. And what's even more interesting to me, Alan, is the age that they started. Like, your father-in-law was 81, I think, when he started.
80.
80, yeah.
I think he was 80. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now he's 81. What started that off? What made them say, you know what, let's strength train now?
Oh man, it was my wife who said, hey, come on over here. Let's start training. Let's start your resistance training, because it was just really kind of sad to see them just languishing, convalescing, not moving. It's just it's one of those things where, with age, people just slow down. They literally slow down.
Yeah.
Everything just sort of, people just kind of prepare to make that walk towards the end of their lives. And it's more like a glide towards the end of their lives, because they ain't walking at all. So it was really my wife, Jenna, who said, you know what? I don't want to hear you complain about your chronic pain anymore. I don't want to see you walking around like an old person anymore. So I have the knowledge. Let's get to training, because my wife, she has a lot of experience with personal training. And in fact, she had done full-time personal training. She was personal trainer of the year of this large health club chain in Southern California. And so she's really good at training. And there was no reason why she, of all people, couldn't help her parents. And so that was how they got on it, is Jenna said, okay, we're going to start this. That's awesome.
And the results that even at that age that you can actually achieve, right? Because because you see a lot of people having this mentality, oh, I'm 60 now, it's too late to start, or I'm 70 now. But there's an amazing 80-year-old who's literally smashing it right now. Like,
it's truly incredible, because he went from doing nothing. I mean, I'm talking the most activity he had was just going out into the yard and maybe clipping some leaves and some branches and stuff, and just going back into the house and sitting down and watching TV. So, and this is the same with my mother-in-law. We're both just very, very sedentary people. It's incredible how muscle at any age, even the oldest 85-year-olds and up, 80-year-olds and up, muscle is very responsive to stress, to the exercise stimulus, to the training stimulus. It will adapt at any age. It can rejuvenate at any point. It's literally never too late unless you're dead. Muscle will adapt. muscle will rejuvenate, which is really, really cool. And it's really wonderful to see those that progress and that youth come back. And it makes you kind of wonder, wow, how many years did we just add to these people's lives? And not just life extension, not just lifespan extension, because statistically everybody has about 80 years. Statistically, on average. There will be people, of course, who cross into the triple digits, but they're a small handful. But yeah, on average, we have about 80 years. And people like you and me who got on the fitness thing, shoot, man, we got about $150. We have about 150 years, you know.
Fingers crossed, David. It's
but
yeah, go on.
The average person has 80 years. So the game plan is, instead of the typical person in the general population who from age 50 to 80 is absolutely miserable. You have 30 years of disability and disease. The game plan is to make that 30 years vigorous and functional and similar to your capacity physically and mentally that you had in young adulthood.
Yeah.
And who knows, even in childhood, you know, that same spark and the same vigor and the same level of energy. That's the game plan. And of course, people who are doing that throughout their lives and certainly throughout adulthood will have an edge on people who started very, very late. But they still would be able to drastically improve the quality of their later years. And that's the game plan.
That's amazing. Are there any sort, apart from the training, are there any sort of nutritional changes that had to happen as well to supplement that training?
Increase protein. Increase your freaking protein. All of this talk about protein restriction for longevity, that's really a bunch of crap. It's a bunch of data that's based on flies and fruit flies, worms, single cell organisms, yeast, and rodents. And it just doesn't apply to humans. People are focused on the mTOR pathway and IGF-1 and how those might shorten lifespan. And I'll tell you what shortens lifespan is a loss of strength and size in muscle. That's what will lead to immobility, right? Sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss, and frailty in general. So frailty would include sarcopenia. Frailty would include bone loss and also strength loss. So it's those things that compromise functional capacity. So the minute somebody becomes less mobile and graduates towards being more or less immobile, that's when the beginning of the end is. And so longevity, when you look at it from a muscle or a musculoskeletal centric perspective, that is the most practical way to approach longevity, because the musculoskeletal system will drive the cardiovascular system if it's functional. And so that's the way things should be working in tandem.
Yeah.
And people miss that. People miss that. If you don't support muscle strength and mass, you're missing the whole point. Low-balling protein does not optimize muscle strength and mass. And this is something that is at imminent threat levels as you get older.
Yeah. I don't pay attention to my macros, not carbohydrates and fat, but protein I pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
Just making sure I hit that number, right? So in short, what we're saying, if you want to age strong, make sure you're hitting your protein right and your resistance training, right?
Those are two very fundamental, crucial things. Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. In terms of sarcopenia, have we seen whether women have higher incidences of sarcopenia than men? Do we have that research?
That's a really good question, and I haven't looked into that, Yusra. What is clear is that women have a far greater prevalence of osteoporosis. So 80% of the osteoporosis cases are women. But sarcopenia, I think it's pretty similar. That would be my guess.
Yeah. Would that be because of the change in estrogen from perimenopause and things like this? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Which means we have to work even harder, Alan. Can't have that. Which means we have to train even harder and eat even more protein, right?
Keep the training going. Keep good nutrition in place. Cover macro and micronutrition needs, and you know, the whole thing about, then there's a stigma attached to resistance training where people are picturing these really muscular, strong, intimidating people in the gym throwing around barbells and dumbbells and stuff. And a lot of people are intimidated and turned off by that. But resistance training can be something as simple as being able to do some knee push-ups, you know, being able to do some body weight squats, or just, you know, some goblet squats with holding a dumbbell to the chest. And it doesn't have to be these intimidating type of things where you imagine somebody doing a 1 rep max with 600 pounds on a deadlift type of thing. So yeah, if people can get past that stigma, then everybody can do it.
Yeah. I think the conversation is changing in the right direction, right? A lot more women are open to lifting weights now, you know, doing a bit more than body weight squats and stuff like that, which is pretty cool to see, right?
It is great. It is great to see. And you know, you bring up the footage of my parents-in-law. It really did inspire a lot of people. And I think you know, a few of those posts that my wife put up, they're in the 2 million view mark.
And I shared them. I definitely shared them.
Good. It's like 2 to 3 million views is what a few of those posts are. And it's really remarkable that the general audience is ready for this kind of thing. You know, they're ready to hear that, hey, you really can start training at 70 or 80, and you really can start getting in shape, and definitely reversing the clock. So it would be nice to think that we can reverse the clock indefinitely, but it is nice to know that we definitely can improve health span and quality of life well into our very, very old years.
Absolutely agree. Well, Alan, I have a few more questions here, but I'm being careful.
Let's go.
Are you sure?
I'm ready.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness,
absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about...
I owe you my arm and my leg.
Thank you, Alan. Let's talk about meal and macronutrient timing, because this whole story around don't eat carbohydrates after 6 it seems to be a myth that doesn't want to die, right? So is focusing on meal timing important for health, first of all? 2, is it important for weight loss? Because I know the two are not the same, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. So let's talk about the health thing for a second. Mm-hmm. At the general population level, the majority of, in quotes, problem eating happens close to bedtime, so after dinner. So if you were to just give somebody a simple recommendation or a simple order, don't eat after dinner.
Yeah.
Just don't eat anything after dinner. And if they follow through with it, then they will have a tendency to, by the end of the day, end of the week, eat significantly less calories and then lose weight. Okay, so that's fine and dandy, but it's not necessarily a long-term solution. But it is something that has worked in research, where you assign a cutoff point in the evening, let's say 7 p.m. That's the last time you can eat something. And in the subjects that was the only assignment. There was no tracking, no no accounting for macronutrition or calories or anything like that. Just stop eating at X time in the evening, early evening. They lost weight. And so therefore, when somebody says nighttime eating is a problem for, weight gain and whatnot, it's not necessarily false. I mean, there's data behind that. And so now here's the problem: making the leap that you need to not eat at night, or you need to front load your calories. That everybody needs to do that. That's when you start encountering counter evidence that really challenges that sort of idea. And okay, so we started off at the very basic level of nighttime eating, mindless eating at night being an issue for the general public. Okay, so now we're going to move to the area of, all right, so what if somebody was aware of their nutritional needs, macronutrition, calories, and they did have that target? Does it matter the timing of the meals or the timing of the constituent doses of that macronutrient setup for the day? Does it matter when they consume it from a health standpoint? The short answer is no. But this is how it does matter. It matters to the extent that you set it up so that the person can adhere to that setup in the long term. That's how it matters. And that's how it matters individually, because some people will be much more of a early shifted type, chronotype. They have that preference to consume most of their calories in the early part of the day. Okay, great. You do that. Why? Because that's what you'll be able to stick to in the long term. And some people will have a preference for late shifted or backloaded, as it were, eating, where their largest meal is dinner. You'll hear people say, no, don't do that because of X, Y, and Z study, and we'll get to that. But that's nonsense. If that person prefers to have, let's say, for example, their largest meal at dinner or the majority of their carbs at dinner, great. That's you. You do that. Why? Because you prefer that, and you can stick to it in the long term. So in the hierarchy of importance is what you eat in total, food selection, food quality wise, and macronutrition wise, and everything by the end of the day in total. That's priority number one for what matters in terms of health. A very distant secondary concern and a trivial concern is how the timing of the constituent doses of those calories and macronutrients are distributed throughout the day. And once again, the main way it does matter is to the extent that the individual prefers that setup and can adhere to it in the long term. So now there is a body of research that points to the health superiority of earlier feeding models, of earlier shifted feeding models than later shifted feeding models. There is a body of literature pointing to that with specific regard to blood glucose control. So insulin sensitivity and glucose control, which may be a concern for example, pre-diabetics, type 2 diabetics, etc. Okay, so there are some indicators of better glucose control in the groups that ate from, let's say, an 8-hour feeding window at the earlier part of the day versus either a feeding window that occurred later in the day or a longer feeding window, like a 12-hour feeding window. There is that research showing better glucose control. Now, here's the big but, okay? But this is a relatively short-term phenomenon, and it's mainly relegated to people who do not train, so in sedentary conditions, because the exercise bout is the single most profound physiological event in your day. And so that changes everything. But even before we get to that, I want to repeat that the glucose control advantage of the early shifted eating models is a short-term phenomenon, because we now have a 12-month study by Liu and colleagues, Liu and colleagues. This was just done in either 2021 or 2022, I'm not remembering. But they compared an early time-restricted feeding model, which was doing really well in the short-term research, so eating from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., with a conventional control condition where the subjects ate from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Same amount of calories, roughly 15-ish hundred calories, a moderate caloric deficit. So they ran that for 12 months. There were no significant differences between groups in body composition improvement, no significant difference between groups in improvements in blood glucose and blood lipids and these cardiometabolic indexes. And so they ran that for the long term, and by the end of the rainbow, it turns out that, wow, there's nothing exciting to be had from a particular feeding distribution. They both made progress. They both improved health indexes. And so while that is anticlimactic from the standpoint of trying to find something novel and exciting, it is a welcome finding from the standpoint of individualizing programs. And that's something that coaches need to do. And so, yeah, that's my long answer to your question about meal timing or food diet distribution and intake distribution through the day and health.
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah.
I actually had a question to ask, is there a specific set of population that we should be mindful of? And you answered my question to say, actually, we have this study.
Yes.
So much really make a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And we also have a 6-month study comparing carbohydrate distribution. And this is by Sofer and colleagues, Sofer. And this is a 2011 study where they looked at carbohydrate that was consumed evenly across breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they compared it with a condition where all the carbs for the day were slammed into the dinner meal. So you have this big honking meal at dinner. And they ran moderate hypocaloric conditions and compared what happened. Interestingly, it was the group that ate all their carbs at dinner who actually had significantly better fat loss than the group that distributed their carbs evenly across the span of the day. And this kind of goes against the entire narrative of early shifted feeding or early time restricted feeding, and especially with respect to carbohydrate. And the authors were kind of perplexed as to how that could have happened. They examined the hormonal profiles of the subjects and concluded that, well, maybe there's a more favorable appearance curve of adiponectin in the back-loaded carbohydrate group. So, but even with something like that, I wouldn't conclude that everybody needs to shove their carbohydrates in the dinner meal for optimal fat loss, because ultimately these small differences are going to wash out. And what ultimately matters is what the individual can stick to, and people will vary in their personal preferences for this.
Absolutely. My preference has always been to have my carbs at night. So that's when I'll have my fruits, and everything else is after dinner. And my dinner is the heaviest meal, purely because during the day I'm handling the children. I've got so much to do. That time when I'm having my dinner is when I'm relaxed. And, and I find that a lot of my clients who are moms prefer that as well, purely because they're super hectic in the day. They're busy in the day. They haven't got time to just sit down and have a big meal. So they choose to have smaller meals in the day. And then at night is when they can really enjoy a biggish meal.
And that's really common. That's really common. But people have heard so many times that you have to eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a Lord knows what, and then eat dinner like a pauper. And it's like, okay, so people are picturing this big old breakfast and this moderate sized lunch and this teeny tiny dinner that they have to eat in order to succeed. And then they're kind of miserable. In my observations, people are so relieved to know that, hey, it's okay for the final meal to be the biggest meal. And hey, it's okay to have carbs after 6 p.m. And heck, it's totally okay to eat something within 2 hours of bedtime. Because what matters is the big picture, not the distribution of the intake through the course of the day. That's the body doesn't operate on this, that level of granularity as far as the diet goes. Now, for performance, for athletic performance, for building muscle, there's different rabbit holes that can be discussed with respect to timing and distribution of nutrients, whether the goal is to increase endurance performance. There are different guidelines for that, where timing does matter depending on the length of the bout. And with muscle gain, there are guidelines that can be discussed depending on really on what's at stake. And so that's a different area, and we can talk about whatever you think is interesting.
Let's talk about fasting, because Ramadan is coming up, Alan, in a couple of weeks. And okay. I'm excited about it, but I'm also nervous because I don't do very well without my tea in the morning. And the fast is I think this time around is between 16 and to 18 hours of nothingness, right? One of the most common stories that I hear is, hey, I've been intermittent fasting, and because of that, I have either reversed my pre-diabetes because of it, because fasting is this incredible thing. And my question is usually, is it the act of fasting or the fact that you've lost weight, and is the weight loss that kind of enhanced your cardiometabolic health and stuff like that? So I guess my question is, are there any unique cardiometabolic advantages to fasting beyond fat loss, beyond weight loss?
The short answer is no. I mean, that's going to disappoint a lot of people. But the benefits of fasting, trying to separate inherent benefits of fasting from fasting's capability to enable weight loss and fasting's capability to antagonize overeating overall by the end of the day, by the end of the week. You can't separate that. You just can't. I mean, you can't separate it in terms of the parameters that are measurable. There are certain parameters that people speculate about, like autophagy, for example.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a non-starter, because autophagy occurs in a state of hypocaloric balance in dieting conditions, regardless of whether the dieting is non-linear, like an intermittent fasting type of model or intermittent energy restriction model, or whether it's daily caloric restriction. Autophagy increases. Autophagy, for those unaware, it's a process where the body gets rid of damaged cellular components. And these damaged cellular components that can potentially impede the function of the cell and are associated with not aging well and also disease states and the like. So autophagy has become this buzzword where people feel that, okay, we got to maximize autophagy. So, okay, well, if you want to actually maximize the progression of autophagy and where it leads, then you would just stop eating indefinitely and then allow autophagy to cross over into autosis, which is runaway cell death, and then the dying process. So more is not necessarily better when it comes to autophagy. And chasing autophagy with fasting, that can be a double-edged sword, because when people fast, you always put your lean body mass at risk, depending on the severity of the fast, the length of the fast. So typically with time restricted feeding, that's not an issue. But with people who are fasting for entire days or certainly consecutive days, you might be chasing autophagy, but you're doing it at the expense of retaining lean body mass, specifically muscle tissue. And that can be a bad thing ultimately. So getting back to your question, Yusra, about special or inherent health benefits of fasting beyond the reduction of body fat levels, I hate to say it, man, because it is going to disappoint people who are big fans of the, in quotes, magic of fasting. But if one person decides to intermittently fast and the next person decides to daily caloric restrict, both individuals maintain a healthy body composition in terms of muscularity and leanness, and maintain a healthy physical activity level. And both of their diets consist of a predominance of healthy foods. They're both going to live the same length and quality of life. There's just no magic to the intermittent nature of fasting.
What I've also observed, Alan, is for some of my clients who've tried alternate day fasting, right? And what they found is on their eating day, they tend to overconsumed calories unintentionally. They just got hungrier. And this could be like a mindset thing, like, oh, I fasted yesterday, so today I just need to eat all the things, right? I'm curious about your thoughts there. Does that happen? Do you have studies around that?
Yeah. So the majority of research shows that when alternate day fasting and even time restricted feeding, like really any of the those variants, even a twice a week fasting, the 5-2 model, when any of those variants are done with ad libitum feeding days, or ad libitum being the Latin term for unrestricted, there still ends up being a caloric deficit by the end of the week, because there's never a complete compensation of caloric restriction on the feeding days. There's always a little bit of margin left over in the deficit range by the end of the week. So if there is any magic, in quotes, to intermittent fasting, it would be that it removes, for the majority of people, the need to purposely restrict on feeding days. So that is the kind of the magic of IF, is less attention and meticulousness necessary, because you're just, when you're fasting, you're fasting. When you're feeding, you're just eating ad libitum or unrestricted. Now, this is not to say that some individuals in the minority will completely screw that model up and completely break the general rule that you result in an energy deficit by the end of the week. because we're talking about a statistical average of what happens to most subjects. There's always going to be a margin of people for whom this absolutely does not work, and they absolutely will be able to eat 10,000 calories on their eating days compared to their fasting days.
And
And
I've
it's not
seen
going to
that. I've seen that. It's very interesting, you know.
yeah, I've seen it too.
Yeah.
I've seen it with time restricted feeding, where you only give somebody 4 hours to eat. They'll eat 4,000 calories in those 4 hours.
And Ramadan, the reason I bring that up, because it's such an interesting time, because here in England, we can fast up to 18 hours. So we literally have about 6 hours to eat at night. But you still find people who haven't lost a single kilo purely because they're able to consume that many calories within the 6 hour windows, even though within that time they're going to the mosque to pray, they're playing with their children. So somehow they're finding time to eat all those calories that they didn't consume, right? So say I'm
100%, yes.
So say I'm fasting Ramadan and I want to maintain muscle mass, and I only have 6 hours to do that, and this is going to last a month. How do I do this, Alan?
Yeah. Protein and resistance training.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount of research on bodybuilders during Ramadan. And surprisingly, even though there's a hydration compromise going on, generally speaking, throughout the span of Ramadan, they keep their muscle. They keep their muscle as long as protein is set at least 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. And if some people really want to nitpick, okay, a gram per pound of lean body weight, then you are going to maintain your lean body mass, as long as that plus the resistance training is in play. You won't have any problems.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for watching the first part of the amazing interview with Alan Aragon. The universe couldn't really handle the awesomeness of that conversation, so we had some technical issues, which means we are going to have a part 2 of this conversation, and it's going to be absolutely epic. We're going to talk a bit more about intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about keto diets as well as other diets. We're going to dig a bit deeper into meal and macronutrient timing with regards to muscle building as well as fat loss. Lots of cool things to be spoken about. I have a lot more questions that I haven't asked that I'm looking to ask. So stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled for the announcement of the second part of this episode. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.